Hello and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today, our guest is Jeremy Arndt, who I met at the Isthmus Handpan Convention in Madison, Wisconsin. And not only did I think it was time that we start discussing the handpan and talk about it in a podcast episode, but I really enjoyed his intuitive style, his performance, and I really resonated with his teaching style as well. So initially we discuss his background in this conversation. We talk about his life as a street performer, street musician, and traveling, and initially through the guitar. And then he brought in the didgeridoo, and then the handpan came into his awareness, and he was really drawn to that instrument. And at the time, it was pretty unique. Not too many people knew about the handpan. There wasn't trainings or anything. So it was really an exploration and using his intuition, playing that instrument. We talk about his travels and influences, studying in different cultures as well. One highlight is his time in West Africa, where he learned West African blues guitar and how that's been influential to him. And then we talk about his partnership and collaboration with Nancy, and which they incorporate yoga, mindfulness, and sound. And their project is Settle Into Stillness. And again, at the time when they began working together, sound baths, sound meditations weren't as prominent as they are now. So we talk about the development of that and also his current projects. I'm really excited that at the end of this episode, you get to listen to the title track off his new album, Distant Vistas. Beautiful. I really hope you enjoy listening to that. So we discuss his projects and upcoming things for him. And it's just really a wonderful conversation about following your heart, following your dreams, and not letting anything detour you. That if you follow your passion, follow your path, things will work out. And that's truly the case for Jeremy. So it was just really a joy to speak with him. This podcast is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa, located in Sarasota, Florida, and online at theomshop.com. The Om Shop is the country's largest showroom of vibrational tools. So if you're looking to up-level your sound healing toolkit, they can assist you to find that tool, find what you're in need of. They also have trainings, workshops, and a lot of resources, as well as their luxury spa there in Florida, and they can help you at theomshop.com. So thank you so much to the Om Shop and Spa for their support and sponsorship of this podcast. Also, listeners, I really appreciate your support. And if you can, like, subscribe, review, all the things, that just helps promote and bring more awareness to all these perspectives and conversations, and really this archive of amazing conversations this podcast has. So thank you so much to your support as well. Please enjoy this episode with Jeremy Arndt.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy, so much for joining the podcast. It was so great to meet you in person and hear you play in Madison. And I just really loved your approach, that I thought it would be great to have your perspective as a musician and, kind of mindfulness and yoga practitioner. So thanks for being here, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so I like to kind of go into background first, backstory a little bit. And so as much as you can and what comes to mind about what got you to where you are. So maybe you were a musician as a child, or those things that sparked you into your main instruments that you play, and of course, yoga and mindfulness. What got you here?
Well, I guess to start off, I started playing music late in life, so I'm not a lifelong musician. And although now we're approaching the point that I've probably pretty close that I've played music longer than I haven't, just because I'm getting older. But I started playing music in college as something fun to do, and my roommate had started to play bass guitar, and he was having a really good time with it. And so I picked up a acoustic guitar. There was a Dave Matthews Band song that I wanted to learn, and I still never learned that song to this day. But I sort of like struggled along with the guitar for 2, 3 years, and then at some point something clicked where I could create my own music with the guitar with all these tools that I had put together from the bits of songs I was learning, and that feeling of being able to create music um, from wherever it comes from inside of me or beyond me was just a really amazing feeling, and it took over my life really. So that was where it all started. And at that time I just played guitar. I didn't even know that the handpan existed, which is my main instrument now. I didn't really know about the didgeridoo. I didn't know, I mean, none of this here was in my consciousness. So it really was just a growth from the guitar. And when I was in college, I started to like go through like that, thought of like, what do I want to do after college? Everybody wants to know what job you're going to get, and I had found a book called Vagabonding that was about traveling the world on a shoestring budget. And so I had this passion for music, and I always had a desire to travel. But I always thought that you had to be like really wealthy to travel. And so I was like, well, maybe I can do that later in life. But this book taught me that really the ultimate thing that you need to be able to travel, coming, of course, coming from a country where we have the privilege to travel, is to have the time, because really you can, that was sort of teaching that you could earn a living with your talents and your gifts wherever you go. So I decided that I wanted to start traveling and playing music, and I did that by street performing. Um, so so yeah, that was really like the where all of this started. And at some point in college, I started to get interested in meditation and yoga, and so I was also practicing yoga and dabbling with meditation. My brother started studying Buddhism and decided he wanted to become a Buddhist monk, and he sort of followed that path. And so we were both kind of interested in these things. And so yeah, so at some point, like the street performing and the yoga and the meditation came together when somebody asked me on the street to play music in their yoga class. Um, so yeah, I didn't set out to be like, oh, I want to do sound healing, or I want to, play music for yoga. It really came just out of a passion for playing music. And because I had that, late start in life with music, I didn't feel at the time that I could go and like book gigs. I didn't know how to, I didn't know where to, what to do. And I also didn't feel like worthy of booking a gig. Like street performing felt really accessible because people could pay me if they wanted to, or they could just walk on by. So
Yeah, I'm curious about bringing it into the yoga studios, at least for the first time. Did you just kind of follow the flow of what was happening in the yoga class? Did you kind of have a plan with the teacher, or was it more that you were the background accompaniment during a yoga class? What was that like?
very much following the teacher, but at that point I had started to practice yoga a little bit. So I kind of knew a little bit about, the energy. And then, I didn't, the first time I went, I had no clue what to expect. And, but I instantly fell in love with it because I always had this little bit of, sort of a clash with street performing because I like to play really gentle music. I always have. And street performing, you're playing in like this fast paced, sort of busy and chaotic environment, and there's a lot of noise. and the handpan is quiet. And so there was all these compromises being made to play in the street. Like I had to uh, get a microphone and a speaker because I played really quietly. And so like then I had all this extra gear I had to carry out into the street, whereas some people that play, especially handpan players, might play a little louder so they can be heard. And also, when you're playing, you want to like kind of match the energy of the people you're playing to a little bit. Um, so yeah, it was, I was finding that I was having to play faster and harder and things that I didn't really want to do. But then when I played in the yoga studio, it just kind of felt like, this is where I want to play. And so yeah, I was playing for donations, and then that yoga studio kind of asked me to um, stick around and play more. And so I had that yoga studio, and I had one in my hometown that was in the town where I went to college. And so I started playing at those two yoga studios, and I was also trading, playing music for yoga. So I was practicing more, and I just really dove deep into my yoga practice, and also playing music in the yoga space. So I played in. It ended up from there, like I would go back and do some street performing tours. And then while I was on the street performing tours, I would book some new yoga studios and then go back and forth. And um, so it sort of like was the start of being able to make a living with my music. And it was a meager living at first, but it was enough. I lived in my van. I had a Volkswagen bus that I bought for $400, and I lived in it, and I traveled all over the country in it. It was really an amazing time. So, yeah.
Yeah, the handpan is such a unique and really a specialty instrument. And I imagine when you started, there weren't a ton of people aware of it. I would say more people are aware of it now. And of course, there's a lot of different makers and some ensembles now. But how did you discover the handpan, and what really drew you into that being, your main instrument? Or I've seen you play several at once. Like, how did that develop for you?
Yeah, it was definitely not a very well known instrument at that time, and I had that advantage on my side of playing this strange and beautiful instrument for sure. But I discovered it on YouTube. I was watching videos of street performers, just to get inspiration because I was getting ready to go on my first street performing tour. I was going to play guitar. At that point, I didn't even play didgeridoo, which came before the handpan. So I was going to travel around and play guitar, and I was interested in looping and different things like that. And so I was watching videos of street performers, and in the little sidebar, like a suggested video said like amazing street musician, and I clicked on it, and it was the guy playing the hung, which is the original handpan for listeners who don't know the history of the handpan. And I was just blown away, and instantly I was like, that's my instrument. It just was a very visceral feeling. um, so I set out to figure out what is the instrument first of all, because it didn't say anything in the video, and then quickly discovered that, oh, it's almost impossible to get this instrument. um, I actually had even like put a post. I had two Volkswagen buses at that time, and I actually put up a post online that I would like trade one of them for a hung if somebody had one. And so it took me 3 years to get my first handpan. I got on a waiting list pretty immediately for one. I wrote the letter to Pan Art in Switzerland, the things that we had to do in those days, and so I started off just traveling and playing the guitar, and I had a cajon. And then that first summer, I got my didgeridoo, and so I played guitar and didgeridoo early on. So, but yeah, the handpan quickly took over for me. So
Yeah, and just to touch on the handpan, a little bit more, especially for people that haven't experienced one or gotten to play one. It's a really interesting instrument. You got the rhythmic aspect. It can be quite dynamic, but it can also just be almost this waterfall of sound, just a very light, gentle touch. I feel that you really have that versatility with it. When I've seen you play, it's almost like you're doing Tai Chi while you're playing it. And it's just such a ebb and flow of sounds. Um, in your experience, it sounds like you played really dynamically with it, maybe as a street performer, but your approach now, and perhaps the music you're creating, um, what feels like the difference, just like learning it and playing it for so many years? What's your particular style, do you feel, when it comes to approaching the handpan?
Um, when I started playing handpan, there wasn't uh, we had no rules because it was very early into the growth of the handpan, and so everybody was writing whatever they were playing and discovering at home or wherever they were playing, and so there was nobody teaching techniques, and there was nobody, we were exchanging ideas and things as friends at the handpan gatherings and stuff. But so I think it just my playing style sort of developed out of coming from the guitar. And I was playing like tapping and percussive guitar where people would tap on the fretboard and, play percussion on the body of the acoustic guitar. So I think some of that, found its way into the handpan playing. And I actually think I don't really remember for sure, but I think I started playing the percussive guitar after I discovered the handpan, but before I could get one. So it was kind of like just this, wanting to use my hands in that way, but I couldn't because I couldn't get my hands on one. So I think it just sort of formed out of, not having a rule to follow or techniques and forms and things. So when, nowadays when I talk to people that are interested in playing, I try to, while I think it's good to learn techniques and the foundational things, like I try to encourage people to also spend a lot of time just playing and having fun and following the sound and seeing where it leads you, because have we all have a voice with the instrument. And um so it really just kind of unfolded organically. I don't think I ever set out to do a certain style. It's just kind of a reflection of my experience. So,
Yeah, I think it's really unique and special that your chosen instrument is like that. I mean, if you think of instruments like the violin or guitar or these things that have been around and have an established technique and foundational, sometimes people approach it more in a disciplined aspect at first rather than just being curious and like, what happens if I just play it? So I think it's really cool that that's how it started for you and developed into your own style, because you were just following the flow and being playful with it, and talking to other people and learning with other people. So it's just a really cool aspect of that instrument, since it is newer in our musical consciousness, right? Yeah. Well, how about the didgeridoo then? I mean, what a amazing combination when you pair the didgeridoo with the handpan, but it sounds like the didgeridoo came first for you. Um, so talk a little bit
definitely.
about that. That's also a specialty instrument, I would say, especially because of the breathing that it takes for that. How do you get into the didgeridoo?
So the first encounter I had with the didgeridoo, we had I lived a much different life in college, and we had a party at our house, and I woke up one morning and there was a didgeridoo left in the corner. So I just picked it up and blew in it, and I was able to make the drone sound and sort of like filed it into the back of my mind that it'd be fun to learn someday. Um, Probably not long after that, I discovered the music of Xavier Rudd from Australia, and his music was my favorite for the next couple years after discovering it. So that's where the idea came to like combine the guitar and the didgeridoo. But then that first summer when I took off from Michigan to go out west and do street performing, and I had got a job out west also. So I was moving from Michigan to Utah, and I did my first tour, um, just like a little 8-day road trip. And I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I was meeting with a friend for lunch, and we were eating in like an outdoor dining space, and just heard the sound off in the distance, and it was a really cool sound. So when we finished our food, we followed that sound, and it was two people playing the didgeridoo in the street. It was a husband and wife, which to this day I'm still friends with them. Every time I go back to Colorado, I go visit them now. They're in their mm, if they listen, I don't want them to get upset if I aged them wrong, but I'd say mid to late 70s. And so they were a well-known duo on Pearl Street Mall and in Colorado and Boulder for a while. And they invited me to a didgeridoo festival that they were going to later in the summer. And so I took the flyer for that festival and decided that I would go there, and that would be where I'd get my first didgeridoo. So I made one out of PVC pipe before that so that I could learn some of the techniques, and then went to the festival, and that's really where I was blown away just by talent from all over the world that were playing the didgeridoo, and um, so I was hooked.
And I know I've at least read that you've traveled to study in different places and different cultures. I'm sure it's hard to like pick out what's most influential, but what particular places did you study, and what came from that still you kind of hold really close to your heart, or perhaps
Yeah,
use in your own music?
yeah. It actually is not very hard for me to pick out what's the most influential because, the core of my like strongest, most dedicated music learning period of my life was living in West Africa. So that's easily the most influential. So I had mentioned that I had a job out west, and I had moved out west to go work this job. It was a company that my aunt and uncle worked for, and I was doing building like basketball courts with these special. It was a special type of court. They're called like sport courts, or you could play multiple sports on these plastic tiles, and kind of a little niche specialty thing. And I had worked there for like 6 months, and they needed somebody to go do 4 jobs in Africa. And so it was like a long period of time, and everybody else had families and kids, and they didn't want to go to Africa for an extended period of time. And I was like this young kid that wanted to travel, so I was like, Africa, I'll go. And so I went from being just like a like low level worker to all of a sudden I was the only person in the company that would go to Africa. And so I had to run a job sites in a couple of different countries. And so I had asked the company, the nature of the company was that I would go work for a while, and then I'd have free time, and then I'd go work, because it was sort of gig oriented. We had a job that lasted 2 weeks, and then I might have 2 weeks before the next job. So I asked them if they would book my flight, so that I had about 3 months worth of work, and I asked them if they would book my tickets for 6 months. So I had 3 months to stay there. And so they sent me to Africa. And I ended up only going to 3 countries because the fourth one got canceled. But when I landed the very first day in West Africa, I met a guitar player, and I had my guitar with me. So like my taxi driver took me to this guitar player's house. He was like, "You should meet my friend." And um, yeah, long story short, like I ended up living with that guy and his family when I finished. And actually, before I even started the work, I went to stay with him and his family, and I hired him to work with me. So we traveled to all these places in West Africa together, and he was my like right hand guy, and he helped me to navigate Africa. And we did the work, and then we would get home every night and we would play music together. So he like very intensively taught me African blues music on the guitar. And uh, so yeah, that was, I spent 6 months there. Most of that time with him, I spent a month without him, studying the kora, which you can kind of see in the corner there, in Gambia. Uh, most of my time was with him in Mali, and then we also went to Senegal, and I spent some time in Guinea on my own, just a couple weeks there, and that wasn't really music; that was just work. But then 6 months later, after I got home, I went back and ended up. There's a long story around that too, but I went back and ended up living with his family for like 7.5 months, and studying more music. And that time I had quit the job, and so I just was able to focus on just the music when I was there.
What an amazing experience and influence. And yeah, the kora, isn't that the origin of the banjo, right? There was a movie
Yeah,
by Bela Fleck about that, right? Yeah.
yeah, Throw
Yeah.
Down Your Heart.
Yeah, great movie, great documentary. Yeah.
I
Yeah, the
never
kora.
saw the
Hmm.
movie, but well, actually, maybe I did. But I know the music for sure
Yeah.
from that documentary. So
Yeah.
yeah, the kora and the ngoni especially.
Yes.
There's several
Right.
types of ngoni, and there's the smaller ngoni that is the strings are laid out very similarly to how the banjo is laid out. So that whole family of instruments for sure.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I can see how that'd be so influential, and what a chance and maybe not chance meeting, and that just kind of changed the trajectory of your time there and your musical experience. That's awesome. And the rhythm of, is such a different feel, that
Yeah,
type of
for
music.
sure.
So yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And you had asked earlier about how, my style, and I'm 100% sure that, that time spent learning those African rhythms on my guitar, have come through and to my hands playing on the handpan. I don't think about them in that sense, but I'm sure they're there, the influence.
Yeah, I'm sure they are too. Yeah. So I think the next chapter is maybe, perhaps the work you do with Nancy,
Yeah.
and how that's developed. So maybe if you want to talk about, the different aspects of your work. You have solo album and your solo career, and then, is it Settle Into Stillness? Is
Mhm.
that right? The work that you do. So maybe you talk about how that's developed. And I know you all do a lot of retreats and traveling, but, what does that look like? That collaboration, and, where's it taken you?
Yeah, so it really is the next chapter because up until now I was, by myself. And when I got back from that second trip from Africa, I came home with literally like coins in my pocket. I was so broke, and so I immediately contacted the yoga studios that I was playing at and started playing in the yoga classes for donations again. And it wasn't I wasn't home for maybe, well, actually, so I had booked a round trip ticket out of Africa to come home for a little bit and then to go back to Africa. And I come home, and I was home for like a month, and I met Nancy. So I met her in the local yoga studio that I practiced and played at. And she I was playing in the class. So the first time we met, we didn't really like talk too much. I was playing in the class. She came and talked to me afterwards. I gave her, like, I used to hand out like 4x6 photos that I took on my travels that had my website on 'em. That was like my business card. So I gave her one of those, and we went on our way. And then she was on a family vacation in Dollywood in Tennessee. Well, they went to visit some friends, and they went to Dollywood, and there was a hung player there from France, David Charrier. I think that's how you say his name. And so she had seen me, and so she started talking to him and was like, "Oh, there's somebody that plays this back home." And then she bought his CD, And when she came back, I was playing again, and she knew I was going to play, so she had made a copy of the CD and brought it to me as a gift. And that time we talked a little more, and then I went home and I was like just thinking about her, and uh yeah, so I asked her on a date after that second meeting, and we just planned to get like tea by the river and spend an hour together, and we ended up spending like 12 hours together. And then we were uh from that first date like planning our travels and our life together, and so we uh we went to 5 months later. It wasn't maybe just a couple weeks later that we decided we were going to go to Australia together. um for me it was like the influence of the didgeridoo and wanting to go to there. And then there was this ease of like you could get these working holiday visas in Australia, so you could work and travel. And also there was a culture of like people living and traveling in vans in Australia, so it just seemed like an easy place for us to go travel. And so we bought tickets, and 5 months later we were on a plane to Australia together, like barely, really looking back, we barely knew each other at that point. And so yeah, we spent so she traveled on some money that she had saved up from a business that she had started, a pet sitting business, and a job that she had. And I traveled with a one-way ticket. Well, we both had one-way tickets, but I had a one-way ticket, $200 and a box of CDs and my instrument. And so, I had to get there, and immediately was going to start street performing. And so we spent this really amazing time, a year in Australia, and then 3 months in Southeast Asia with the savings that we had brought from the time in Australia. And we started to run out of money, so we came home. And uh, yeah, at that point she had spent 15 months away from her career in as a dental assistant. And we were at a crossroads, like, did she want to go back into that or not, and what was I going to do? And so she did go back into dental, but we decided that we wanted to do something together. So we took our yoga teacher training together at the studio that we had met at. And then that way, when we had that, then we could do like yoga and music together. And so we did that, and that was, I think that was like a 9-month course. And we got out of that and started to do yoga and music workshops together, where she was teaching and I was playing. So, okay.
Yeah. So, and how many years ago was that you started the yoga and music?
So it was 2013 that we started the training. We finished in 2014.
Yeah.
So it would have been probably 2014 that we started doing the yoga and music workshops together.
So almost 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
almost 10 years.
before that point, like when we had met, um, I was already playing music in the yoga studios, and I started to do like these sound journeys, is what I wanted to call them back then. I didn't want to use the term sound healing. Like I didn't ever look at myself as a healer, and I didn't want to use the term sound bath. It just didn't feel like it fit. And I did sound journey because my first album was called Journeys, and I'd been on all these travels and things. So it was kind of like bringing all these instruments from around the world. And so I had started leading these sound journeys in 2011. And so when we started doing the yoga and music together in 2014, like we just started calling our workshops these sound journeys. It was kind of an extension of what I had been doing in 2011. And yeah, from there we had talked about like if she was going to play music or anything, if she was going to play instruments. And she had dabbled with the violin and flute when she was a kid. So we talked about what the options were, but she didn't really play any instruments at that time. And we were visiting some friends in Arizona who do they've done sound, like these sound baths. I don't know what they call their events, but they did these really amazing sound baths in the upper level of their home. They lived in this dome house in the desert, and so they were an older couple. I've been doing them for years, and she was a crystal tones singing bowl distributor, and she played singing bowls, and he played all sorts of instruments from around the world. He played the kora, he played the handpan, Native American flute, which is what he was known for, was his Native American style flute playing. And so he would loop everything, and she would play the crystal bowls. And at that point, like, we finished taking that from them, and Nancy was like, I want to play the crystal bowls. She had heard them before, but we hadn't heard anybody play them like really skillfully. And when she heard, her name is Barbara, when she heard Barbara play, she was hooked. So we got a couple crystal singing bowls from Barbara, that worked with my hand pans. And so then we started doing like restorative yoga and hand pan with crystal singing bowls. And then I don't know where Nancy discovered the gong, but she became interested in the gong. And I was interested in the gong from a visit to a place called, I think it was called World of Music in Chicago. They used to have a big gong room. Had you ever been there?
Yeah, it's a really cool place. I don't know if they're still there anymore, but yeah.
Sadly or not, but that was
Yeah.
my first encounter with the gong. So of course I was really into it when she wanted to get a gong. And so we started to look for a secondhand gong because she wasn't sure if she wanted to play. So she figured, well, I don't want to buy a new one and then not want to play, and then if I have to sell it and whatever. And so we were living down in Florida for the winter, and one of the gong groups on Facebook, somebody was put one up for sale that lived in Michigan. And so we were like, oh, this is the one. And we reached out to him, and he knew we had a mutual friend. And so we bought it sight unseen, from Florida. We weren't going to be home for a couple months still. So he had met with our friend, and our friend kept it in her house for us. And then, yeah, so Nancy got that gong, and she was pretty hooked from the beginning. It's still her favorite gong, that first one that she got. And so, yeah, everything just kind of really grew like organically.
Yeah, that's really cool. And now, about 10 years later, how has it developed? The field of people incorporating sound and sound journeys and yoga and sound has really boomed and blossomed, obviously, over the past 10 years. Um, why do you think it's so needed right now? And um, do you feel that what you're doing is evolving with the times and the need of the people coming to you?
Yeah, definitely. So, we toured for years, and kind of felt like we were in an ocean by ourselves. It was, we struggled a lot, and we struggled to find places to do what we were doing. And then when we would go there, we struggled to get people to come out and to do them. But we were really determined. I think me more so, I was very determined and stubborn that I was not going to do anything but music. So I kept pushing and pushing and pushing us. And sometimes it was really hard on her. She wanted to go have security, and I was just like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. So it's like, if you want to come along for the ride with me, then like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be really stubborn about this. And so she stuck with it. And we just constantly like strive to make it better. Like, we would learn uh what worked, what didn't work. We got better at playing music together. We got better at communicating, while we're doing these sound journeys. And so as we grew, I think, like, this whole thing was growing too. And uh people were becoming interested in it, and we were getting better at what we were doing. So it kind of hit a point really like around, I don't know, 2017 or 2018, that um, people started to actually come to our events, and uh, you know, I guess bigger groups, and so I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think it was just a constantly like a process of refinement, and then somehow, I have no idea how, but somehow what we were doing also was becoming, people were becoming interested in it. Especially, I think, a lot of things moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. So this was kind of already happening out on the West Coast. And that's where we are doing a lot of our touring in California and Washington. And so, these things were coming to the East, and we had been doing this for years and years and years. And so we had a network built up, and I think it was I kind of describe it like we were, all these years that we were struggling doing this and persevering, and you know pushing ourselves to just to stay the path and stay the course and do it. It prepared us for like, there's a wave coming behind us and we didn't know it, and then we were able to like catch this wave and ride it. And so now, um now we know that this whole thing of sound is becoming really popular. And you asked, why is it so needed right now? I mean, I think we can just look at the state of the world right now. There's so much noise and chaos and uncertainty, and for whatever reason, these instruments just take us to a place that's beyond all of that. And for some time, we can put it aside and just be inside our body and in ourselves, and connect with something beyond us. Um, so yeah, I, we you had asked in like the pre-interview wording, like about following the scientific or the intuitive, and like we almost, while we almost have 100% followed this intuitively, and although we're also in the camp that we don't like just share information mindlessly that is proven or not proven. We just do the work, and we do the sound, and we play the sound, and we just do what we really love. And we don't have a lot of the scientific knowledge of what's going on, and but we also don't share a lot of the sort of new age things around sound healing that is common talk, because we don't know if it's true or not. So but what we have is just the experience of sharing this with thousands of people, over and over and over again, and seeing what it's done. And we're really lucky that people have come to share it with us, and it's been one big experiment. So
Right. Right. And that's beautiful. And, when you're in the flow of offering, um, other people receive, but you do too, when you're just being intuitive and in the moment. And there's times when you and Nancy look at each other and say, that was an amazing one. And then there's other times you perform and it's okay. It went fine, but it's always a learning experience. Even if you may have the same approach and the same instruments in front of you, it's a different experience each time, and the feedback you get is different each time. So it's really kind of an in the moment meditation and creation with what you guys are doing. Yeah. Yeah. So what does it look like now? We're post pandemic, mostly, I would say, and you guys seem really active again. What do things look like now?
this last 6 months of touring, I'll back up a little bit, because the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020 was like the best year we've ever had touring. And we kind of hit a point that we were in our stride, and we knew how to like make it all work. And so we were making it work, because we had an intention to buy a house at the end of 2020. And fortunately, we bought our house at the end of 2019. We didn't expect it, but so we had like booked the most, intense year of touring that we'd ever done, and we were on our tour, and every event was selling out, and it was just really special. And then boom, it all had to stop instantly. It was like the world was kind of caving in, and the pandemic hit, and we had to go home. We canceled 80 events in 2020, and we were really scared because we had just bought a house. Um, and we bought it from some friends of ours, and the way that we had worked out our contract and negotiations is we had split up part of our down payment for before the tour that we paid them, and we were going to give them the rest of the down payment after the tour. So we were really worried about that, but we got home, and they called us, and they were like, we just want you to know that the house is yours. Like, we'll work all this out. And um, so so yeah, we had 18 months of no touring. We were home. We really just dove into connecting with the land here that we live on, and gardening and everything. And then we started to tour late 2021 again. And so it's kind of just felt like, slowly, the first tour, people weren't comfortable to come into this spaces together. We didn't even really know, like, we were always worried if we were going to catch COVID when we were working with groups, which we miraculously never did. We got it, but not from doing what we're doing. I went to a car show and I got it. Uh, so, but so everything was ramping up. And the last 6 months really feels like we got back to the momentum of where things were in the end of 2019 and 2020, as far as people coming together, sharing these experiences together, the excitement of, people wanting to come out and share what we're doing. Um, and then all of a sudden, I think during the pandemic, so many more people discovered sound healing, and so many more people got instruments, spent their time at home during COVID, like learning the gong and crystal singing bowls. And so like now, post pandemic, it feels like there's like this community coalescing around all of this. Whereas it was there before, but I think it's like really strong now. I think we're really like um on the verge of having like sound healing festivals and sound, right now sound healing is a part of a festival. It's like, oh, there's a couple artists at the festival. And so I'm really excited for what the future holds with this. I think we're on the verge of a lot of expansion. So
Definitely. And it's expanding really quickly, really rapidly. Yeah. So, you've released some albums recently. So let us know about your albums, and then maybe any projects you're excited about or opportunities coming up.
yeah, okay. So um in all the early years of touring, I started to uh collect, I guess, audio equipment, which you can see behind me. And with the intention of starting having a studio one day to work out of. Um, and so all of a sudden, when the house came into our life, I had all the equipment, and so we had a studio. And so we've been doing a lot of recording since being here and having the house. We formed an ensemble called the Settle Into Stillness Ensemble. Our intention for that is to have a collective of musicians that can come in and do this together. Right now we have Nancy, myself, we have our friend Parker, who plays the handpan and who's a really talented percussionist. Our friend Jackson, who's a harp player. He's a classically trained harpist since he was 8 years old. And our friend Autumn, who plays the violin. And so we've, formed this ensemble. And our most recent project that's in the works is our Settle Into Stillness Ensemble album. So we started recording that last year in January. Well, yeah, January 2022. So last year in January. And now we're in the mixing and editing phase of that. So that's probably the biggest project that we have going on right now. As well as we did a live recorded video of one of our sound journeys back in March. So that's, and then we had the audio and video professionally recorded. So that's in the works right now. So later this year for Settle Into Stillness, we have a lot of good stuff coming out. Plus, I think we're still in the early talking stages of this, but the ensemble album won't have any gong playing, or it's more of like compositions and stuff like that. So we just got a new gong from Sean Aceto, and so we've been amassing this big gong wall over the years, and so I think we're going to make a gong album this year also for Settle Into Stillness, just maybe like a half an hour or 40 minutes, sort of a gong meditation with all these different gongs that we have. So lots going in with Settle Into Stillness. As far as my solo music, I actually have one sitting right here. I just finished this album. It's called Distant Vistas. And this is a really cool like exploration with modular synthesis, which I don't know if you can see. Well, you can see this is a modular synth back in the corner here. And the handpan. So I was creating these ambient soundscapes with analog and modular synthesizers, and then playing handpan over it. So that album I released in March. I did my first solo tour since Nancy and I started touring together. So that was really fun for me. And I plan to do some more of those in the fall, and continue sharing the music from that album. And yeah, there's a lot of projects going on. I've recently recorded with some guys from Australia and a guy from Finland. We have a project called 8 Hands of Sound, and that's a handpan album. But we all are multi-instrumentalists, so it's probably like 30 different instruments at least on the album, where we have handpan, we have electronic music, we have woodwinds, we have flutes, we have pianos, synthesizers, world percussion, drum kits, we have guitars. I don't know, it's a really cool album. Nobody really knows about it. We never really like did a whole lot of advertising or marketing, and we were never able to tour it because of the pandemic, and just because we're from 4 different places in the world. So that's a really cool album, and honestly, that's probably my favorite piece of recorded music that I've been a part of to this point. And then, yeah, I have a number of solo, like handpan only albums. My most popular album is called Journey's Handpan Solo. And that album has really given me the means to build my studio and things like that. So yeah, lots of recorded music.
Awesome. Well, it's really cool kind of hearing your story in that way, from street busking and trying to make it happen to just all these opportunities and where they take you and who you get to collaborate with, just by kind of following your drive, your intuition and creativity. At least from an outside perspective, it sounds like you've really got to where you always hoped, and maybe even better than you imagined. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely better than I imagined, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So yeah, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, it's just been, it's really been just a journey of following, what things that I was passionate about, and then what things Nancy and I were passionate about, and sharing those things that we're passionate about. You had asked about the retreats earlier, so that became, just out of people were saying, oh, I wish I could travel like that, or I wish I could, be there with you guys, and it just kind of grew out of, well, okay, let's make it possible that you can travel with us and be with us, and sharing. We go to these places and really dive deep into the culture, and try to share something that's a little deeper for somebody else when they come. Somebody might only get a week or 2 off from their job in a year, so they don't have the time to dive 3 months into a culture. And so we kind of shared the little bits and pieces that we've taken along the way. But yeah, it's been just following passion and following sound. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's not always an easy road, I'm sure, but you learn so much from the challenges. And, traveling is not always a luxury. There's a lot of things that can make you uncomfortable, but being able to adapt to situations, it's all part of just growing and learning and yeah, riding the waves of all the adventures. So yeah, it's really cool. So any kind of last things that you want to share with the audience about yourself or just and how to kind of follow what's coming up for you?
yeah, I think, one of the biggest things that Nancy and I want for people is to for people to understand that they can like live a life from following their heart and following their dreams. And we really hope that what we do inspires others to do that too, because the life that we've built in our building is from following our hearts. And we've had people inspire us that we wouldn't be where we are today if they hadn't inspired us to do these things. And we have people come to us that are inspired by what we do, and they've followed their own journey. And that doesn't mean, for it's not just for people that want to play music or want to have sound. It's for anything in life. We all have these gifts that we're given in life. And I think if we tune into ourselves and find our gifts, find the things we're passionate about, and then own those skills and follow those passions, and then begin to share those passions, like it'll work out. I don't know what magic makes it work out, but it works out. And it's been, you said about a struggle. It's always the challenge. There's always the discomfort. There's always struggle, but you get more comfortable with the discomfort. You get to where you can live with it and live with the uncertainty. And like Nancy and I, we've not had like a financial backing for this. It's just been us doing this. We're independent. It's been very grassroots. And so it's just been born out of a desire to like make it work and keep working at it. And if you're going to work 40 or 60 hours for somebody else, like what can you do if you put that time into what you love to do? Then you can really go do a lot with that.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, and a really wonderful message that when you know what your path is and you can step fully onto it, um, it is amazing the miracles that happen, just to help clear the way for you, and all the ups and downs in between. But um, putting your heart fully into it, you know, nothing will stop you. Yeah, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful way to lead your life. So yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And that's a wonderful way to leave. I think learning more about you and how you've gotten to where you are. So thank you so much for joining us for this podcast, this episode. And it's been really great to learn more about you and your journey. So thanks so much, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on the Sounds Heal podcast, and
Yeah,
thanks for creating this space for artists and gong makers and
yeah,
um,
yeah.
musicians and everything to just share their journey. And it's really a blessing. So
Yeah, it's a blessing to me too. It's inspiring to me as well, just to have all these different perspectives. So thank you. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
you're welcome.